Okay, let's continue to prepare our second image that we're going to use to create the composite. I'm going to press the letter V on my keyboard to call up the Move tool. And I want to duplicate my sky layer. I'm going to right click on sky, choose duplicate layer, and I want to name this water. What we're going to do is we're going to have some mountains from Alaska brought in to replace the area with the boats. So we actually want to keep the sky from the corpus image and the water from the corpus image. So we've got our duplicate of our water layer, and we want to create a layer mask that gets rid of everything except the water. So if I get my rectangular marquee, I can just make a selection around this area down to the water just below the boats. Now remember, I have selected the sky and the boats. So if at this point I clicked on the icon to create a layer mask, I would actually create the layer mask with what's selected, and I want the opposite. So instead of choosing select inverse, I'm going to hold down my option key or my alt key on Windows and click the add layer mask button at the bottom of the layers panel. And let me go ahead and do my visibility icon on sky, and you can see because I held down the alt key or my option key, I actually did an inverse of my selection and I can only see my water. So I'm going to enable the sky layer again. Now I want to bring in my picture from Alaska. So I'm going to click on sky, and we want to choose File, Place, and inside the Chapter 4 folder, we want to select Alaska, and we're going to click Place. Now you can see the Alaska picture isn't quite wide enough, and we don't see very much of the sky, which we're going to replace with the corpus sky. So what I want to do is I'm going to move this down just a little bit, and I'm going to resize it to fit the width of my image, and I'm going to drag it up. And you'll notice as I clicked and dragged it down, because of that mask that's above it with the water layer, it actually looks like I'm moving the mountains down into the water. So let's just find an area of the mountains that we like. We can hide parts of it with the mask, and that's pretty good. And again, I'm going to resize it to give me more blue at the top for the replacement of the sky with the corpus picture. So now I've got it resized so it's the width of my image, and I've given myself a little bit more blue at the top, and I'm going to click my check mark on my options panel. So now we have our Alaska layer placed between the water and the sky layer. Let's go ahead and rename Alaska. Double click on it, and let's name it Mountain. Okay, so first thing we want to do is create a mask to remove the sky on our mountains so that we can see the skies from corpus. So I'm going to get my magic wand. Your quick selection tool may be selected by default. Select magic wand, and we can go ahead and leave it at the tolerance of 32 because we want to get that blue sky. I'm going to go ahead and click, and you'll see that it gets almost all of it, and I just want to go over here on the left and get the rest of it. So that just took 2 clicks. I'm going to press my option key or my alt key and click add layer mask at the bottom of my layers panel, and now I can see my corpus sky. Go ahead and press letter V on your keyboard or select the Move tool on your tools panel, and if I click on the sky layer, I can actually click and drag to reposition the part of the sky that I see behind my mountains. And be careful, you don't want to go too high because then you'll start to see some of those buildings. So I'm going to go about there. So that gives me a little bit more clouds and gives me a little bit more of the red colors in the sky. Okay, so we've got the mountains and we've got the sky behind it, but our water doesn't look right. We need to create a reflection of our mountains. So let's select our mountain layer and let's duplicate that. So remember, you can right click on the name of the layer and choose duplicate layer. Let's rename this Mountain Reflection. Click OK. So now we have the mountain reflection layer. And our problem right now is we want it to be over the corpus water. So let's go ahead and drag our mountain reflection layer above the water layer to change our stacking order. Remember, the stacking order in our layers panel is whatever's on top is in front and whatever's at the bottom is behind. So we want to bring our mountain reflection to the forefront. And we want to actually reflect this. So we're going to click on Edit, Point to Transform, and we're going to select Flip Vertical. So that flips our mountains upside down. And what we can do is get our free transform tool, Command T or Control T, And I'm going to resize my mountains. I'm going to squash them a little bit. Because remember, this is a reflection in the water. I'm going to pull these down, maybe off to the side so I can see where I'm going. Because we're going to use a mask, we're going to hide that water that's with the Alaskan mountains already. So we want to squash our mountains just a little bit, because again, they're a reflection in the water. And I'm going to press my return key or my enter key to commit to that transformation. So we use the free transform and we smushed them. Now I want to create a mask to hide the water. So I'm going to get my rectangular marquee and I'm going to select the area of the water below my reflected mountains. And you'll notice that we already have a layer mask from before when we duplicated our mountains. So let's right click on that layer and choose delete layer mask. And let's make a new layer mask with our selection. So I'm going to hold down my option key or my alt key. I'm going to click on add layer mask. And now I've removed the water from the original mountain picture. Now let me go ahead and hide the mountain reflection layer just here by clicking on the visibility icon. And if you recall, we had some rocks here in the forefront of our corpus picture. So I want to go ahead and select those rocks and bring those back in to my reflection of my mountain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my water layer, make sure that's selected and it's my image, not my thumbnail of my mask. And I'm going to get my magic wand tool. And again, that's the letter W on your keyboard to call that up quickly. And I'm going to select my rocks here in the forefront. And this is going to help improve my composition of my mountains being reflected. So now I've selected my rocks here using the magic wand, and I kept my tolerance at 32, and that did a really good job with my selection. I'm going to turn the mountain reflection layer back on by clicking the visibility icon. And then I want to click on the mask on the mountain reference. Now what I want to do is I want to get my paintbrush tool. I'm going to press the letter B on my keyboard to call that up. And now I'm going to paint with the black color where my selections are. And because I have those selections already created, that's the only way my brush will actually work. And painting with black creates the hole in my selection so that I can see the rocks come through. Press Command D on Mac, Control D on Windows to remove the selection. And let's take a look here. Now, our only problem now is our mountains look identical to the mountains above it, except they're smushed just a little bit, and we need to see our water. So what we can do on our layers panel, next to opacity where it says 100%, I'm going to click and hold, and then I can drag the slider to the left to reduce the opacity of the layer, which allows the lower layer to bleed through. So bringing this down, you'll see I start to see the water come back, and I can still see the reflection of the mountains on the layer that I'm adjusting the opacity on. So you can find a number that you like. You don't want to go too low, obviously, where you turn it off and that's all you see is water. And if we slide it up, we start to bring back the reflections of our mountains. So because of the ripples, you probably don't want to see too much mountain, but you want to see enough to give it the illusion that this picture was actually taken in this manner. And we could go back and we could clean up our edge with the horizon against the mountain to not make it such a perfect line to improve the composition of our image. Okay, to help hide that, what we're going to do now is we're going to create another layer. So I'm going to click on the Create New Layer icon at the bottom of my Layers panel. I'm going to name this Fog. So double clicking on it, I'm going to type the word Fog. And we're going to create a fog line in the middle where we see that really straight line between the water and the mountains to try and hide that a little bit. And I'm going to get my gradient tool. The gradient tool here is on our tools panel. The letter G calls it up. It's a rectangle with the shades of black to white in it. And clicking on my drop down menu on my options panel to open up the gradient picker, you'll see that we have an option to fade to foreground to transparent or from black to white. If you click on that gradient, you'll see it show up here. However, what we want is to fade from white to transparent, not from black to transparent. So what I'm going to do is close this gradient picker, and I want to swap my black and white foreground colors so that white is the foreground. So I'm going to click on the little double arrows to swap the two, to switch the foreground and the background. Now when I go up to my gradient picker, you'll see it goes from white to transparent or foreground to transparent. So it's always going to work with those foreground and background colors that have been already selected before we choose the gradient picker. So I'm going to click on the white to transparent, and actually want to edit this. I want to go from transparent to white to transparent. And you'll notice as I'm hovering, it says click to edit the gradient. And inside the gradient editor, what I want to do is add another stopper in the middle that is white. And on the outside, you'll see here on the right, if I select this one, you'll notice the opacity at the bottom is set to 0. The top stoppers are opacity and the bottom stoppers are color. So you see here, we have the opacity stopper on the far right is set to 0 and the color below it is set to transparent. So here in the middle, I want it to be set to white for my color on the bottom, the color stop. And the transparent or the opacity stop, I want it set to 100 when it's in the middle, so it becomes white again. So on the left, my stops should be 0 on the opacity. I'll click on the arrow, pull my slider down to 0, and then my color stop should be set to transparent, which we can tell by the little checkerboard that it is transparent. I'm going to click OK. Okay, so now I have my color picker set for transparent to white to transparent. So I'm going to draw a gradient from about the middle of the mountains down to the middle of the water. If I hold my shift key while I'm drawing, it'll force me to draw a straight line no matter where I take my mouse. It can go to a diagonal to the 45 degrees or straight up and down. I'm going to go back to the middle of the water and I'm going to release. You'll notice now that I get this fog line that's going from transparent to white to transparent again. If we go over to our layers panel, we can adjust the opacity for this layer to kind of blend the fog into the background. And I'm just going to come down a little bit because remember, part of our goal here is to hide that straight line that we have created with our masks earlier between the mountains and the water. So I'm just going to probably bring it down, maybe to 90%, 89, 90%. And that actually looks pretty good. Now, another thing we want to do is we want to combine our image into a new layer so that we can continue working with it. Now, let me show you on the Layers menu panel. If I click on that, there is an option to merge visible. So all the layers that have the visibility icon active, if I choose merge visible, what that does is it collapses all my layers into a single layer. And notice it took the name of the top layer called fog. I'm going to undo with Command Z or Control Z because what I really want to do is I want to combine all my layers into a new layer, but I want to leave these alone so that in case I need to come back and make any edits later, I'll still have that option. Because right now, if I do the merge layers command, it's going to compress all my layers into a single layer, and then I can't ever make any edits to these masks or to the shading that I might want to do. So instead, I'm going to press my Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. If you're on Windows, that would be Control, Shift, Alt, E. And you'll notice what that did was it created a new layer at the top of my stacking order. So it's in front of my other layers, called Layer 1, and it combined all my visible layers into a new layer, leaving my other layers still intact. So I'm going to double click on Layer 1, and let's rename that New Alaska.